Welcome, and I think we'll get going. Thanks for being here. Our real purpose in tonight is really just to share facts as we see them and actually share a lot of the work that has been done over the last 2 years by the board in getting prepared for this. As you know, we can go back to 2010 and the beginning of a facilities master plan that was put together relative to almost all of our facilities because they were aging at that time. And this is really the capstone project of the whole thing, which is the discussion on the new high school and whether we should do that. And I kind of wanted to start off by saying that we're in a position right now as I'm Tim Taylor, Superintendent of Schools. This is Luke Deerdorf, who is the Vice President of the Board, and Elisa Franson, who is President of the Board of Education. And you may even hear a little bit from the guy in the blue shirt over there is Jerry Peters, who is our Director of Facilities Planning and Management. So we'll try and answer your questions later on, but our real initiative here is to just inform you so that you know a lot about the planning and how we got to where we're at today. And I can really kind of start, as I really like to do most often in these situations, and just let you know that the Ames Community School District is an $80 million business. And I hate to use the word business anytime I talk about education, but it's $80 million that it takes us annually to operate this district. Our enrollment currently is around 4594. That's not a certified, that's actually counting noses. So we're about 4,500 students. Our racial ethnicity of our student body is at 32%, which makes us the 13th most diverse district in the state. And we employ currently 630 employees. When you put all of those numbers together, we actually come in somewhere around the 70th or 71st largest city in the state of Iowa. So we're not a small organization by any means. This resolution document that we have showing up here really is the language that was adopted by the board, and this was not an easy process either. Obviously, we had a community committee, and the community committee's job was to get the facts, much like I'm going to try and share with you tonight. They were then to go out into the community and talk with people and find out, is there support for either renovating the current high school or building a new one? In the meantime, the board intentionally hired a Phase 1 architect who was Hala Architecture out of Ames. They're actually located downtown. And their job was to gather information and data to bring back to the board relative to that very same question: renovate or build new. And we're going to share some of the information that came back from the Hala study, which led to the board decision to pursue a new building. And as is the process, the community committee, on their final meeting, came to the board with a recommendation that they call for a referendum to build a new high school. With that being said, we come back to Hala Architecture and the work that they did. And part of their information that came back indicated to us that as we looked at the current building at Ames High School, the shell actually is in pretty good shape. They noticed some circulation problems. They noticed some other issues that were there, especially the idea that it was built in 1960, and there have been, in that time period, 13 additions added to the existing building, which can create lots of, and it does, electrical and mechanical issues with different systems trying to talk to one another. There are currently 11 elevation changes. Some of them are not ADA accessible. And I think maybe more than any other item that maybe caught the board's attention is the existing building, keeping in mind the context of the tenor of the times, has 83 doors. 83 doors to get in and out of that building. And we're going to talk about some of the security issues that come along with having 83 doors for people to come in and out of that building. And as you will see in the diagram I'm going to show you in a minute, once a person gets in that building, they have free range. They can go just about anywhere they want to go. So those are some of the major concerns that came about, is the fact that there's also some circulation issues in the building. The hallways are quite narrow. I found myself last week, along with Eric Schmidt, and he has his daughter up here in the front, who is our PR person, and also media and school relations. He and I were on the second floor of the high school at 9:21, which is a bad time to be there. There was a dismissal from first period to second, and we literally did put our backs to the wall. Now the kids were orderly, as Ames kids always are, and very polite, said hi, but they were still, I wish I would have been able to get to my video in time to video that, because you would like to have seen that horde of students coming down the hallway at us. It was pretty interesting. So we have some circulation problems. As I said, some ADA accessibility, the security issues that are there. If you've ever been down in the fine arts wing, it's kind of a labyrinth down there. I know Jerry was doing tours this summer. I think he found a lost freshman from 1968 or something that was down there. Not really always the best. Last but not least, which came out of the information from HALA, was that the renovation project itself would cost in the neighborhood of $85 million. Finally, the question always comes up, what if we don't do anything? The estimate from HALA Construction was $30 million over the next 15 to 20 years, especially to replace mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. It doesn't do much else other than that. So actually a lot of money to actually do nothing for a building. This is the existing high school building. And the interesting part about it is you will see the different colors that Jerry put on here where all the different additions have been added. The one part that I think is really interesting about this is if you can see the little kind of, I call it pink, although I don't believe it's really pink, but there's a pink horseshoe on the left side. That was the original building built in 1960. Not very big. The other interesting part is 2 years later they found out they needed more space. So if you take the addition and you go over to the orange one right next to it, that's the two-story part of the Ames High School at the current time. That was built in 1962. The yellow part attached to that at the top right, dead in the very middle, was in 1963, were the administrative offices. And then Jim Dresser remembers adding the gymnasium then in 1965, because there wasn't one in the building. The rest of the additions, including the science wing at the bottom, the fine arts wing, the cafeteria, swimming pool, all have been added since that time. As I pointed out, one of the security issues here with the 84 doors, the exit to the outside, is at the current time, if anybody gets into the building, whether they're there because they are voluntarily there or not, or they wanted to get in as an intruder, there's no way to departmentalize that building to keep them isolated to where they're at. They are free to wander anywhere they want in the building. And if you put that into context of what's happening in today's world, it becomes a little bit scarier, I think, for people. The other thing that we have taken a look at, and I think quite intentionally, for the security issues, are things that we will probably build into the new high school. Not probably, we will for sure. We've had Homeland Security come and tour the high school, plus some of our elementary buildings, just to give us some additional ideas on what we can do for security. But I think what's important is you're looking at Meeker Elementary building, and this will come up a little bit later also. In Meeker, it's a totally different situation. The entrance into this particular building is in the top, the box that you can see in the very top, kind of to the left. I can point to this one kind of good. The rest of them. That's the security vestibule, and as you as parents know, you got to be buzzed into the vestibule, buzzed into the office before you can make your way into the building, and once you make your way into the building, you actually exit into the commons area, or actually it's a cafeteria that sits right here. We have the ability, in case of an intruder, to hit one button from the secretary's office, lock down all of those wings to keep that person in that area. Or if he would happen to get into the building someplace else and begin to raise Cain, we can lock down the rest of the building and isolate him there. It helps us with our security issues. I know that we can do better with some things, but that's what we're finding out from Homeland Security. But we like the ability to lock that building down, departmentalize it. We can also allow the public to come in and use the cafeteria in the middle at the very top. They can make their way to the gymnasium. We can lock down the rest of the building, and that's as far as they can get. So we don't let people get into the academic wings if we can keep them out. That's easy to do in high schools, and we have schematics of how that can look. Currently, this is a couple pictures from the inside that talk about the ADA issues that we have at Ames High School with the steps. The one that you see on the left is kind of interesting. And for those of you that know it, this is the ramp, the long ramp that begins the labyrinth down into the fine arts wing, where we found that kid from 1967. Our plan, I think intentional and intelligent by the board, is if you're familiar with the property, you know that we do have practice fields and other things. Oops, I didn't want to go that way. We have practice fields and tennis courts and other things kind of located in this particular area. Build a new high school. We can keep the current building open. We can surround it with construction fence, which we have to do for liability purposes. And you can build a new high school in 3 years, the building. 50 years from now, if you're having this meeting, and maybe we'll all be in that meeting too, you're deciding to build a new high school, you just flip them around. Just like we're doing at Meeker, just like we're doing at Mitchell, just like we did at all our elementary buildings. You can build a new high school because the practice fields will be moved where the new high school is at. 50 years from now, you put them back on the practice fields where they're at, move the high school back to where it's at in its current location, so you can keep flipping that back and forth if you so desire. Renovation, incidentally, was estimated at 5 years. So if you think about that and the logistics of operating a high school building with 1,450 kids or more, because we are growing, if you can imagine trying the logistics of operating that high school building while it's still being remodeled, you can see over a 5-year period, as President Franzen always says, you'll have 2 classes that will know nothing about anything other than a renovated building as they go through and graduate. It's a long time. The other interesting thing is we just did a demolition on the old Edwards building, which many of you are probably aware of, and it's interesting to see how things are recycled today. We hired an architect who knows a lot of people, and we had a lot of old furniture that we're not going to use anymore. And when you talk to him, he says, well, I know some people. And he does. He managed to sell almost all of the existing furniture that was in that other building to other school districts that were in need of furniture. So we got a lot of money back from that. The demolition person actually tore the building down. Jerry ground up a lot of the brick so it can be used as base pavement for Interstate Highway. And the demolition was done at about half the price of what we thought it was going to be, just because that person knew that they could demo, sell, and make money come back. So there's a lot of things that we can do that's really pretty handy with that. Thought I would show you this just for your amusement just a little bit. This is the history of Ames High School, and the very first one is on the left side. It was used for some 31 years. I believe it's currently where City Hall is at, and it was demolition. There was a demolition of that. The interesting picture, and I told Eric that I want him to blow that picture up, make it great big, and then we're going to put it on the wall out here. And you can't see it from where you're at, but I can put it up here and you can take a look at it later. But if you look at the windows on this particular building, you'll notice there's little black dots in the windows. Those are kids standing on the windowsill and hanging on the outside of the building while this picture's being taken. I can't imagine what would happen if we did that today. I don't think I would be here very long. Here's the part I know that you all are interested in. And just for a little bit of history here, if you remember in 2011, just prior to the referendum for the elementary buildings, I stood in front of groups just like this, many of them, and promised them that your property taxes will not go up as a result of this project. At that time, your property taxes were at $14.65. They're currently $14.34. I'm going to stand here today and I'm going to tell you your property taxes will not go up as a result of this project. Now, there's things I can't control. I can't control the legislature. Who can? I can't control your property valuations, but they continue to go up, and I think they probably will. I don't see them going down. The interesting part about this is that school districts may not go into debt as deep as they want to go. We have what's called a statutory debt limit. And if you want to know what our statutory debt limit is, it's pretty simple math, keeping in mind the very bottom line, because I'm going to start there first with you, which is called the maximum debt service levy. The most that we can charge you for debt service is $4.05 per 1,000 of your property valuation. That's the maximum that we can do. We can't go any higher. The assessed valuation of the Ames Community School District, not the city, just our district, is at the top level. It's $3.8 billion. Not all of it's taxable. About $2.5 billion of that is taxable. You can do the math and figure out that right now our statutory debt limit, we can go into debt as much as $191 million, but we won't. We don't need to for any particular reason. But the thing that's important about the line at the bottom is we cannot charge you more than $4.05 at any time. Right now it's at $4.04. Why? I think you got to go back a ways. In the mid-90s, we were adding additions onto the high school. Then we built a new middle school. Then we did the elementary projects. And all during that time, we've kept that debt service limit at about that level, knowing that we could take that portion of your taxes to pay down the GO bonds that were issued for all of those projects. And it's a lot like what the old thing of where you, if you can, every now and then, send in an extra payment on a month on your house. Pay down that interest as quick as you can. And Chris has been spearheading this. Chris Stenson's our CFO in the back, along with Piper Jaffrey. And Piper Jaffrey has been an amazing consultant for us for our bonding and the bonding capacities over lots and lots of years. But by doing that, we paid off the middle school project, I believe it was 6 years in advance, and saved you $3 million in interest payments. We're doing the same thing with the elementary buildings. We're going to pay that off in advance. We're going to save you about $6 million because we will have that paid off on June 30th of 2020. And what I'm telling you now is that June 30th on 2020, that 405 will go down considerably because we're not paying off GO bonds. It won't go down totally, but it could go down. Unless, if we are lucky enough, or if the referendum does pass, we'll continue at the 404. So as you're looking at this, the answer is your taxes won't go up because of the 404, because of this project, and it's likely that they will go down. Let's say quite likely. Just for comparison purposes, this is some information that Chris put together for us. You can see where we're at compared to schools in Story County and also many of those in the metro area. And you can see that we're at 1434, and you look to our neighbor to the north at 1959 and Gilbert at 1891. We're $4 and $5 less than the people who live north and south of us. You can look at many of the metro schools, including Ankeny at 18, Waukees at 17 for now. They just passed a referendum for another second high school, so that was bound to go up a little bit. The only two schools in Story County that are less than us are Colonesco and Roland Story. So it's $14.34. That's what you're currently paying per thousand for your property taxes. And that's why I can tell you that because of this project, your property taxes will not go up. Like I said, I can't control the legislature. We really need somebody who can, I think. Debt-free, June 30th. Property taxes won't go up. Hala Architect figured if we're going to go geothermal like we did for our elementary buildings, and incidentally, when we went geothermal in our elementary buildings, we've saved us $250,000 annually on utility bills. The estimates from HALA is we could save between $80,000 and $100,000 per year using geothermal or the opportunities for wind and solar assist on utilities on our Ames High School building, which annually is around $450,000 per year for utility bill. It's a pretty healthy chunk. We think there's pretty favorable economic conditions right now, and our bond rating is not at 2 AA right now, but it's still solid. That's the estimate that I thought I would keep in here from HALA Architecture that shows on the very far left how much the expenses are for utility bills for our existing high school. We were given three, the one right next to it incidentally, the second one from the left, is the estimates on utility bills for renovation of the existing building. Adding a little bit more space, a little bit more cost, no energy savings due to geothermal. The other three bars that you see were three different schematic designs, and I'm going to show you one here in a minute, that came from HALA Architecture about what a possible building could look like and how it could fit on the site. And you can see that they're all pretty much about the same, but that still is $80,000 to $100,000 less than what we're currently paying. So there's a lot of efficiency wrapped up in geothermal for sure, and a new building. I may come back to this one in a second. When it comes to academics, we're really looking for a modern work environment for our kids. And that's where our problem is at Ames High right now. And I know Joel Sullivan is a social studies teacher. You all know him as a girls basketball coach back in the corner, would attest to the fact that he doesn't have enough space really to help with 21st century skills in his classroom. 21st century skills, you're asking, what is that? One of our main goals in the work that Dr. Ross has been doing over time is to get kids engaged in their learning. I could show you a picture, not that one, or that one. I will get to it, this one, and then I can back up. You recognize this from when you were going to school? I sure do. This is a picture at Meeker School, and if you want to count noses in there, that teacher standing in the middle, at the top, had 45 kids in her classroom. Yeah, ouch, that does hurt. I always like to point out the young man sitting in front here. He's not very happy, I don't think. But you notice how they're on nice little rows? That's an industrial model. And I almost like to call them tombstones, because they're getting exactly what you're getting right now from that teacher basically on a day-to-day basis. I'm telling you what you need to know, and you're going to spit it back at me upon demand, usually in a test or something later on. Never any chance to determine how you can use that information, and even better yet, the real completion on transfer is when to use it. Trying to get kids engaged. If you walk into our classrooms today, you'll see what may appear to you to look like chaos, but they're generally speaking, desks are together so that they're working in groups. They're up, they're moving around. And if you go to Workiva, as a good example, you won't see office spaces, you won't see cubicles, you'll see space. You'll see places where people can work individually, places where they can work in groups of 2 or 3, or they can work in even larger groups, because the 21st century skills of today is really based on the transfer of that knowledge. It is communication, it is collaboration, it's problem solving, and hopefully in the end, it's creativity. It's not sitting in a desk like that. That's kind of frightening even to look at. I gotta get it off of there. So when I come back to academics, we're talking about those soft skills. We're talking about collaboration, problem solving, and I'm going to mention flexible learning spaces, which I'm going to show you some in a minute here, but it's also engagement and it's technology. And the one commercial that I happened to see this weekend really hits it best. And I can use my computer, but even yet I could use my phone. It's still stunning to me. I'm not a digital native. And as I look around, is it amazing to you that all the information a man has is right here? And the best part of having it right here is not that it's here, but what we're trying to do is, how do you use that information? So technology is really the key to this whole thing, and we need technology spaces at Ames High terribly. That being said, this was one of those schematic designs that I promised I would show you a little bit earlier. This one's called a landscape design, And you can see that it's actually on the practice fields right next to Ridgewood. You can see the stadium still sits behind it. Those practice fields then have been relocated to where the existing high school site is at. And you'll notice a little black box kind of on the, as you're looking at on the right side. That's the swimming pool, and that question has been coming up as we've been giving these presentations. What about the swimming pool? Now I got to go back to this one. School finance can be very complicated, and thank God I've got Chris to rely on. And even as I try to explain this in a simple fashion, I get myself confused sometimes. The big green box is called the general fund, and if you're interested, that's the most sensitive fund that we have. We receive currently about $6,700 per student that goes into the general fund, which pays all teacher salaries and benefits. It pays for the $65,000 a year trash bill. It pays for paper. It pays for transportation. It pays for utilities for our buildings. It all comes out of that general fund. The other ones, incidentally, we call them silos. The other ones, incidentally, are earmarked only for specific things. You can't use them for any other thing. So sometimes we say, well, I've heard people say, well, you just bought a new truck for the, sorry, I'm picking on you, Jerry, facilities planning and management. Why don't you use that to buy a new teacher? We can't. Simple answer. The kind of, is that, I don't know, I'm still going to go with pink. It says management fund on it. Part of our levy there. Those funds can only be used to buy insurance. And you know we need liability insurance. We need casualty insurance. We need workers' comp insurance. Thanks to the community, just this fall, the purple one, PEPL, is called Physical Plant and Equipment Levy. That levy was approved by the community for another 10 years. The funds that come into that for us can be used for buildings, buying new buildings, transportation costs, and technology. Thank God for that one. It puts air books into the hands of all of our students. So we're one-to-one in technology. It's really one of the great ones that we have. The interesting thing about PEPL, and Chris will tell me if I'm wrong, I can't use PEPL funds to sand that door over there and restain it. But I can use PEPL funds to buy a new door. Same hold true for the tires on a bus, Chris. I think it does. I can't use the PEPL funds to buy tires to put on a bus when we buy a new bus. Those funds can only use those particular things. There's a debt service limit, which is the one, or service that we were just talking about for paying off GO bonds, for instance, on buildings, or other debt service for any other kinds of things that we want to do, facilities, athletic facilities, whatever it may be. And the brown one on the end is a really interesting one, because you probably do remember when you suddenly had to start paying an extra penny sales tax a number of years ago. The state collects that extra penny, and we get $3.4 million worth of pennies. We really don't. They don't send us to us in pennies. But we get $3.4 million per year in what's known as 1 cent sales tax. It goes under the name Save 2. But that one runs out in 2029. We've been using Save money to also help supplant and help with our technology, a lot of software and things that we use. We've also used it for this facility and the athletic fields. We have about $15 million of it that has not been spent, and we're saving that to build that little black box that was on that schematic design, which is the swimming pool. That's why you won't see that on the referendum. And I think the other good part about it is, as you think about that, we really have the money ready to go. We need architects right now to tell us where on a high school site is going to be the best place to put it in relation to the high school building itself. It may be connected to the building, it may be separate. But we're pretty much ready to go with that. And we've been working, as the board members will tell you, because they've been involved in it quite deeply too, we've been working with the Ames Cyclones Aquatics Club, who is raising money for an endowment to help us cover our operational costs of that new swimming pool. So pretty much ready to go with it. That's kind of gives you an idea of where it could be and what it could look like. As you look at that high school building that's sitting there, it's actually 3 stories, but one of them is kind of built into the hill, so it's kind of underground, and there's 2 stories above ground. The white boxes that you see on top of the black box actually will let natural light into the building. And I have some examples of what that looks like. And that's kind of how the Phase 1 architect works. Creates a schematic, comes to the board and shows them, here's how it can look. What kind of options do you want? More circulation space, especially right here. The entrance to this area, to the building, actually is on the kind of the far right lower corner. People who come in, it's easy enough right here for us to build that security feature so that they've got to come into the office. They can't go up the stairs. They can't go where any kids are at. We can also isolate wings just like we did at the elementary buildings if we wanted to, where we'd have a fine arts wing for productions, auditorium, which needs to be replaced at Ames High certainly. But there'd be fine arts activities. People can go to the fine arts activities. The rest of the building is locked off. We can have another wing for athletics. They can go to the gymnasium for athletic events. The rest of the building would be locked off for security purposes. But it creates a lot more circulation space. And there's one of those white boxes, if you look at the top of the picture, where we've got natural light being able to come into this particular building. That's kind of how that works. And when I talked a little while ago about flexible, agile spaces for kids to work, here's a couple, at least pictures of good examples of that, where we've got a situation on the left side where 2 kids are working together to solve problems and collaborate. And the top picture on the right side, you have a group of 4 kids. And at the bottom, we really have learning centers, which used to be called libraries, which are then called media centers, and now called learning centers. We keep changing the title on them. But we can also create maker spaces for technology. If you're familiar with maker spaces, Edwards Elementary and Teresa Green, who was just recently identified as for top STEM teacher in Iowa because of her makerspace that she's developed at Edwards Building. It's a place where kids can go and take their creative ideas and work and see if they do work, especially in technology. They can build things, they can see how it works. We have a tinker space, incidentally, at Northwood School for the preschool kids, because they're still using computers. I mean, they're starting to use computers, which is kind of surprising. Especially since when I have a computer problem, I usually call my 4th grade great-grandnephew. He can tell me how to get it fixed. But the tinker space at Northwood School is built under the same idea. It's a place where kids can go, use manipulatives to create and build things on their own, let their creative juices flow a little bit. On the referendum, and this has kind of been a little bit of a sticky point, but I want to clarify this for you. It says $110 million. We're planning $105 million for a new high school, and the board is elected to add $5 million on that referendum to add additional classrooms, and you may read the referendum language itself. It's going to include Mitchell, Meeker, and Edwards School. Why? You just built new buildings, and I caught a lot of grief in 2012 because the buildings were too big. Since 2012, we've added 381 students, 224 at the elementary level. And in my 26 years in Ames, that's unprecedented. I think the high for population in the Ames schools was in the early 1980s, and it was 6,500. Jim probably remembers. 6,500. We're now at 45. Why? It just declined. We had that massive growth. And right now what we have is some growth that's happening in southwest Iowa, or southwest part of Iowa, of the district, over near Edwards School, that's going to extend to County Line Road and north. I think they've got 55 new homes built there already. And if you go on South Duff near Mitchell School, there's going to be a large amount of housing construction taking place along the west side of South Duff near the airport. Mitchell, Edwards, and Meeker do have flexible classroom places for bubble classes, but we're starting to use those up. And I think the important thing for you to keep in mind is that the board is elected to add $5 million on there to be proactive and not reactive. They don't have to spend it right away. But as the need arises, it's there to do that. As the need arises, 5 years from now, they could do that. 10 years from now, they could do that. But at least it's in their pocket and ready to go. The other question that came up, and I know we had it today as well, why not Sawyer and Fellows, especially Sawyer? And this comes back to a large debate that we had with the board before in looking at our elementary buildings as they were in 2010. And the other thing I would tell you about enrollment, which is really going to surprise you, I think. In 2010, we had 200 students that open enrolled out of the district, and we had 200 kids that open enrolled in. I need to keep this closer, don't I? 200 out, 200 in. This year we had 179 open enroll out, nearly 500 have open enrolled in. You may ask why, and I can answer that one for you because this is a place to be. There's new facilities. We've been able to maintain programming that attracts kids. What kinds of programming? Fine arts, orchestra, band, those kinds of things. We've got 450 kids in our high school band. Whew, it's bigger than Iowa State. But it's a good thing. But not only that, we offer AP classes that a lot of other schools don't. I know you're familiar with AP classes. Those are the ones that high school kids can take and actually earn college credit. We offer a lot more of those. So we've got the programming that attracts kids. We've got the facilities at the elementary that attracts kids. We've got, maybe more than anything else, we've got diversity that attracts families. And we've got people like Joel that attracts families too. We've got some of the best teaching staff, I think, that we could ever imagine. And administrators were working hard for kids. People see that. We've been ranked the #1 public school in the state of Iowa by Niche, which is from Carnegie Mellon University, for the last 5 years. And that's something I think we all need to be proud of. So it's really a fund that sits there when the board needs it, if they need it. And right now, those 3 buildings, the reason we didn't identify Sawyer, and I was going to finish that statement, is we had that debate back when we were getting ready to build, new, or remodel. We knew that Mitchell School was actually pretty new, in pretty good shape. So we thought we could renovate there. Actually, the renovation cost us more, which I'll come back to in a second. Sawyer School is also next in line as being in the best shape, so renovate. The discussion that came from the board, and you can say, well, that's good thinking or not. I think it was pretty solid thinking at the time, was why do we want to put this district back in the same situation we're in 50 years from now, where they've got to build new 5 new buildings all at once. Let's renovate Sawyer because it's in good shape. Let's renovate Mitchell because it's in good shape, and let's do it on a 20-year basis. So 20 years from now, the thinking was, take a look at those 2 buildings, build them new, 20 years from now. Now you're not having to do them all at once. The interesting thing about renovation, by the way, not only is it longer, but it's also generally more expensive. And Jerry has always used the phrase that I will never forget. The only thing about renovation that's certain is that it's uncertain. You don't know what you're going to find. And if you talk to West Des Moines, they passed a referendum, I think it was 5 years ago, for renovation of Valley High School in West Des Moines. And the bond issue was for $90 million. It passed. The same architect that designed our elementary buildings was responsible for designing the renovation of Valley High School in West Des Moines. They're still not done, and they're at $120 million. Finding stuff that you just don't know is going to be there. As a matter of fact, when we were going to add the cafeteria onto the high school, we actually hit a gas line that nobody knew was there. Pretty lucky at the time. So it's there. I think this kind of gives you kind of a summary of what we talked about. 13 addition changes, 11 elevation changes. We have concerns about circulation, security, development of 21st century skills because we don't have the space. It's going to take 3 years to build a new one, 5 years to renovate the existing building, and the property taxes won't go up as a result of that particular project. I don't know how much more I want to add, but I want to give our board representatives a chance to say a word or two. And then we'll take your questions, if that's fair. Either one of you want to start first?
So one of the things that I've been telling folks as we've been talking about this, I was elected 2.5 years ago, and at that time when I was out and about talking to various members of the community of what are the things that we need to make sure that we're focusing on, and the number one topic that was brought to my attention was we need to address the high school. And so it was shortly after that, I remember it vividly, it was December of that first, those first few months that I was in, that we went ahead and we started this process. And this has been a really thorough process, and we have studied it. We had a board up until September that studied it, and then, as you know, our election at September, we brought in 3 new members to the board, got them up to speed as much as we could at that time, and I think they got really well up to speed, and it was a unanimous vote to move forward and offer this opportunity to the public. So we had an indication from the board this summer that we should move in this direction and offer the opportunity to the public, and we had the indication from, obviously, with the current board and our unanimous vote to go ahead and go to the bond referendum. So I think the important thing for me as a board member is I really feel like we have done our homework, and our job is to provide the opportunity to the public, and I appreciate that you're all here because you're trying to become informed so that you can then provide us the direction next Tuesday on whether to move forward with this or to go back to the drawing board and figure a different route out. Regardless of which path you go, it has to be approved for a bond referendum, whether it's a renovation, whether it's $30 million to patch what we have to go to a bond referendum. So it is the community that really needs to provide us the direction as your board on how to move forward. So thank you for coming tonight. That's really all I have to add to Dr. Taylor's presentation, but happy to answer questions after Luke speaks.
Again, thank you for coming tonight. What I'd like to say is I think this is a great opportunity for our community. Two main factors is when we did the elementary projects, our effective rate on our bond was under 2%. It was like 1.9%. And we're still in that economic environment where we need to think long-term as a community about investing this money now because rates are going up. And again, I'd rather do something now and take advantage of those low rates than deal with a higher interest rate down the road. So from that standpoint, providing stability financially for our district is ultimately important. But probably furthermore, is the opportunity we have, because school finance is so messed up and weird, that we have a lot more ability to spend capital for facilities to really save money for our teaching staff and programs. I understand why, but the legislature puts frameworks like Dr. Taylor had up with his silos that really protects the whole system, but it can really be at the detriment of our programming and our kids. It's frustrating to me in the fact that we can build brand new buildings, not raise taxes, but at the same time have to cut millions of dollars from our operating budget and then cut programming. So by looking at this as an opportunity, invest in our facilities now, we can save money in energy costs, we can provide that long-term stability for our teaching staff, again, what Dr. Taylor said, talking to our kids and providing those great opportunities for them long-term. So great opportunity for our community to move this forward, and I'm excited to see what happens on Tuesday. So with that, we'd love to answer questions or hear comments, feedback.
While you're thinking of questions, Jerry will be here to help us answer questions too, but just a little story about this.